Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. So, this is going to be part one of, because I took a lot of notes, the Vladimir Putin, leader of Russia, and Tucker Carlson interview. And I found it to be very informative, and I'm glad it happened. And I'm really concerned about the amount of censorship Americans are pushing for. But I think a lot of the pushback is actually just bots who are employed by the military-industrial complex to keep sucking off tax dollars to fund a proxy war with Russia and to cost Ukrainians more lives. So, here's some notes that I wanted to discuss that I learned from the interview. One thing in particular was that he gave a long introduction of Soviet Ukraine, Russia, Poland, and World War II. That, I think, is important because, unfortunately, American education systems are not that great. However, we do have smartphones. We can look that stuff up ourselves now if we're history buffs. But, junior high, high school, all that, people are not necessarily taught a whole lot about what happens over there in those nations. And World War II is usually only focused around the Holocaust and Hitler, right? And there's so much more we can learn about it, but it's really only focused to that. And I think he was smart to bring up that, because it puts the sort of regional history into perspective. He also mentioned how Stalin shaped modern Ukraine, calls Ukraine an artificial state. I didn't know that. Had no idea that Stalin had anything to do with Ukraine, and that some people view Ukraine as an artificial state. Wow. Stuff like that makes one feel more humble. And then he mentioned 1654 borders of Hungary, Poland, and Ukraine. And so this is interesting, the mention of artificial state and former borders, right? You're like, oh yeah, countries are kind of like always shifting their maps. Interesting. Look at America's borders, how we started, and you're like, how will it be in the future? It's strange. He also talked about brotherly love of civilized nations to be welcomed, talking about how they became a market economy, left the communistic format, became more bourgeoisie, and that they thought that they would be welcome into the brotherhood of civilized nations. Sort of pointing out how they were not welcomed even though they left communism. And I thought that was interesting because he's pointing out how he feels Russia has been sort of targeted unfairly. He also talked about eastward expansion of NATO. Now, there are a lot of leftists like Voshvi who will say if you complain about the expansion of NATO that's fake, but clearly I don't think we can say that it is fake because they did keep expanding. And we do know that when Cuba did the whole Bay of Pigs and any type of threat on Cuba facing towards the United States, towards Florida, that caused a lot of nervousness for the United States. And I do believe that if we were having some type of expansion that NATO was doing to Russia, I don't think we would like it very much. So I can kind of see his point. He also talked about something I find to be very important, which was the mentioning of the rise of Nazism in Ukraine. So this is true. And before Google, Instagram kept, like, for months when that war first launched, kept saying accounts from Russia can't boost posts. I never boost posts. And it would give me that notification every single day, every few hours. And I have two-step verification, and I have all that security stuff. You can see I'm from America, I'm not from Russia. But I think people kept flagging my account as Russian propaganda when there's nothing Russian on my page. But they were getting rid of Russian pages. Etsy shamefully even banned Etsy sellers and shipping to and from Russia, but allowed Ukrainian stuff, because a lot of the hijabs that I buy, they come from Ukraine. And so the sanctions, that they put on was also like a market boycott that a lot of different websites did on the Russians. So it is interesting. My whole point is that when there was this big wiping of Russia stuff, there was honest articles pointing out how there are members of the Nazi ideology in the Ukrainian military, and that is real. And then slowly some liberals admitted, yeah, but they're not those kind of Nazis, and it's not too many. But Putin's pointing out, actually, there's enough to be concerned. So I found this strange. Vosh also, those types defended it. New York Times, if I recall, they were like, oh, there isn't. Then there is. And then if you posted about it on YouTube or Facebook, stuff like that, your account might literally get banned. Okay? They would say it was misinformation if you said that Ukraine had a Nazi problem or any Nazis whatsoever. But now, I think if you dig it up, they've stopped that. That's the strange part about U.S. media. They censor the truth tellers, and then when the truth can't be held back, then they're like, oh, sorry, I guess we'll be on your team now. And so I do find it strange that the leftists in America call the people of the MAGA party Nazis, but then they say that we need to keep funding the war in Ukraine, which helps actual Nazis. So I found that to be quite strange, and Putin is contending he's against Nazism, so we're fighting the anti-Nazis in essence. I mean, I'm putting this lightly. I know there's a lot more issues at hand here, but Putin quite clearly, with his interview, was like, I don't like Nazis. You can get that, right? And that the Ukrainians are flirting too much with that ideology. And there's plenty of people who have done investigative journalism that's not the establishment who have proven this. And so I just found it interesting. So it's important for us Americans to understand Russia's perspective. He also mentioned how the war will stop if America stops funding the weapons to Ukraine. The war would be over in a few weeks. I think this really highlights how us taxpayers, like just working class Americans who are having so much garnished from their check, seeing their community struggle, and realizing that hundreds of millions of dollars are like getting towards weapons for the war front of a country most of us can't find and we don't get a whole lot of benefit from. And then if you criticize that, the leftists, because they're the ones who own the social media, they'll ban you and censor you and deplatform you. And I just found that to be interesting, that if America just didn't get involved, that whole part of the world could settle their problems themselves. Really gets into the conversation of America's foreign policy and thinking that they have to use our money to help the world. Well, if you go all throughout California, there are so many homeless, so many gangs, so much rot. Absolute rot. And you're like, wow. Ignore the growing infection in our country of decay, hedonism, broken homes, and keep creating this chaos around the world. It seems quite strange to me. It shows you that the establishment politicians who live off of our tax dollars and are super corrupt, they want to keep things going. It doesn't really affect them and their families because they're living in wealth. So they just kind of like piss on our heads and, tell us it's raining. He also mentioned says Russia is not into expansionism into Poland and Latvia, and so the accusation labeled against Russia was, if we don't stop Russia and Ukraine, they're going to expand out to Poland and Latvia. And he pointed out that, Russia and Ukraine have a history together. Going over to Poland and Latvia is not really part of the agenda, and we're not going to go broader and broader and broader like some Roman Empire. And I found that to be interesting because he directly addresses the Hillary Clinton-esque neoliberal agenda by mentioning that that's not his goal. Now, we have to hear both sides. This allows us to hear both sides, and so I appreciate that. He also acknowledges how global war will harm humanity, and it'll be quite devastating. And that's good. That's good. The Telegraph on Instagram keeps pushing World War III, and I think that the elites really want to go to war with Russia, and they will sacrifice their citizens for their own private gains. So the common people have everything to lose from a World War III. But the elites, they're going to still be having their fresh foods and excellent health care and fancy clothes and private security, while our communities become more disheveled because all the good men are out dying in a foreign war. It's really quite sad. And how gangs will just fill the vacuum. He also mentions European and American taxpayers' funds being used to cripple Russia, essentially. So that is important because we get to see, as an American, why should we care so much about Russia that we would want our money to be used over there and not here instead? There's this growing consciousness of the warmongering history of our nation and how that has made more war widows, more veterans with PTSD, and created more broken homes and destabilized our respect in the world, and that the goals of the elite are not our goals, that they just propagandize us. And they always say there's no money for this, there's no money for that. No money for this, no money for that. Oh, but war, we got you. So they're more concerned about causing death than fortifying life. He mentions mercenaries. Now, in the Machiavelli book I've been reading, The Prince and Other Writings, he talks about the problems of mercenaries, and Scott Horton, he's done a lot of stuff about, U.S. war history, and mentioned mercenaries and proxy wars and, funding of terror groups and stuff like that, and regime change wars. And so when Putin is mentioning mercenaries, I find that to be very accurate. And if you want to catch up on my series on Machiavelli, just check out the playlist. But I like how there's this discussion of modern mercenaries and how that really, creates quite a number of problems. Also says doesn't understand why America would want to send troops to Ukraine. Asks why does America need to do that? Nothing better to do. Why not focus on our debt and border? That's a good slap in the face, I must say. It's so interesting how our politicians will brainwash us and say Israel's problems are our problems, Ukraine's problems are our problems. But there's other nations that are more broken that we clearly say we don't care. Like Yemen's devastated. Americans don't say, let's help them. America went into Afghanistan, didn't create anything of a lasting utopia. It's 20 years, something later. And now the nation is left in massive poverty, and the Taliban got it all anyways. Nothing was really done there. The great project didn't even happen. So what was all that money for? All those people who died, there's nothing. And so to send, they haven't decided to send full-blown troops to Ukraine to help out, like how they have done, like how they did in Iraq or Afghanistan, right? But it's a great question to say, okay, your border's open, you have growing crime and drugs, abortion rates are up, the teens are half retarded, it's just such a mess, we have huge debt, and you think that the best use of your time is helping out Ukraine, and then when you sit back and realize the elites keep pushing Zelensky in our faces, and there's videos of Zelensky that he was a comedian. He did a piano show with his pants behind his ankles and played the piano with his penis. He also dressed in high heels and a skirt and slapped his butt and did a music video, which I shared that a long time ago, but then I won't share it now because it's like sharing gay porn. But the Zelensky is like, why would a guy like that be put as a military leader for a country against a country like Russia? There's so many questions, but you're not allowed to ask. And liberals get liberals and Democrats, and even some neoconservatives who like war, they don't want you to ask these questions. And the social media companies are trying to really push a one narrative thing. And if you start to question it, you're like, hey, what's going on? But non-interventionism is a growing trend now amongst the political science junkies, because we see like, hey, we need to focus on our own problems. We need to do something. Like, we're not so healthy right now as a country. It's strange. People are complaining how they have to work so much and they get so little in the cost of housing, and water quality is going down, and farmers are struggling, and you're like, but the wars rage on. The politicians money grub more. It's a great point. And I think you don't really love your children if you're going to send them to Ukraine to die. I don't think so. And it says that he mentioned, Russians will fight to the end. And you got to value that type of valor spirit. Why would you want your neighbor to go die fighting a Russian so far away? Like, what? There's gang members in your street who are recruiting your daughters, your community's daughters, and turning them into whores. How many women are turning to OnlyFans to pay their colleges? And there's so much homegrown problems. But you think that the men of your nation should go fight Russians because there's this old history between Ukraine and Russia. What? It's just something else. Something ain't right. And then he mentioned how he contends the CIA blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, and that I learned that there's 2 pipelines there. Nord Stream, whatever how you pronounce it, 1 and 2. And then he mentions it's in the Baltic Sea, it's underwater, it exploded. He called it it's called industrial terrorism. He asked, who has the capability to attack such a pipeline, to go under the ocean, to do such a thing? These are not your run-of-the-mill operations. And I realized, hey, that's a good point. In my head, I think of a pipeline, never seen an oil pipeline. Never, what? But he has a great point is, who has the money, time, and, knowledge to do such a thing? It's not just some graffiti artist going and doing that. You see what I'm saying? So, I think it's important for Americans to know that the CIA is not some organization that is a good entity. Seems like a monster of many heads, and many of those agents I think are going to burn in hell, to be honest. Okay, and then he mentioned German leaders are not invested in their national interests and their pipelines, but are rather sort of puppets of the West, as I think is how he's getting at. That they'll listen to their Western overlords before they'll listen to their people. And because their pipeline getting destroyed does hurt them, and they're paying a lot with energy costs. It does appear that the war of energies is very prominent, and it's pretty scary when you think about it, how much we need energy. And then he talked about the dollar's place in the world, and how the dollar as a foreign policy struggle, that the dollar is the cornerstone of the United States power. So if you look on our money, there's a capstone on the pyramid. Very occultic symbolism, but there's an eye there. But I find that to be interesting that he used that type of language when on our money there's literal capstone, a cornerstone. You're like, hey, wait a minute, what's going on here? But that's But you remember when I mentioned Etsy and how it cut off money from Russia, and Instagram as well did? If you notice, he mentions that the nations are downsizing their dollar reserves for ways to protect themselves, and that the United States restricted Russia from conducting transactions with U.S. dollars, and that means less power for the U.S. and that they shouldn't use their money in that way. And now that's pushed Russia to reduce how they trade in dollars and use the dollar currency. And because America has its dollar pegged to oil, but also it's like the US dollar is like supposed to be powerful, right? And that if the dollar goes down, our country's power goes down. Because if you look at other nations that have really weak currencies, the dollar, you can, like, pesos are getting stronger, right? So look at the exchange rate of pesos for the dollar. And then we begin to see what is currency. It's a very strange beast. You know, that it's fascinating just to think about money, how money works and what it can buy and purchasing power. And so when Etsy and all those sites decided to collectively punish Russians and to limit their ability to get money, they thought maybe like, oh, this will make them bend to the will and make them angry at their leader. But it inadvertently, and quite directly though, at the same time, caused people to see the insecurity of the US dollar. And I think many of us Americans don't think much about our money. You know, we're not on the gold standard. We have fiat currency. We don't understand much about banking. A lot of people are in debt. And inflation is super high. So I think it's important for us to say, like, hey, what is our money? What is the dollar? We should start paying attention to that. I guess we just always have to make sure we can survive. That's homesteading, you know. It's really fascinating when you think about the right to hunt and fish. You know, things get bad. You can garden, you can hunt, you can fish, right? Because it is a little freaky to think about how brutal the downfall of America would be, considering how sick our population is. Everyone's on pills and drug addicts, and they're just a rotten country at the bottom that has like a rug over it, and people just keep walking and ignoring that there's all this rot and decay. But how would things really shift if people can no longer afford their medications? We already have broken healthcare system, barely existing mental health care system. So if we go down even worse, people can't afford their medications, we'll have more people having psychotic breaks, children will be less safe. Our nation isn't used to struggling in that way. The way our people struggle is usually involves a lot of crime and harming each other. Like, the poor communities, they don't just live in peace, they throw garbage everywhere. There's so much pain and suffering, extreme violent crime, murders all the time. So if the rest of America got poor, it would just be total anarchy, like the Last of Us zombie apocalypse, you know? Faction against faction. Probably have to have some type of martial law declared, and then a bunch of factions would rise up and start warring with each other. Americans don't like each other sometimes. I think we have these models of brotherly love in Philadelphia, but then you look at Philadelphia having so much violent crime and robberies and stuff like that, you're like, that's not real. So I think America, we're floating on the ghosts of the past. And so our rot that can happen is right there. And I think we're going to come to terms with that real quick. Because we don't have a unified culture. People are so dependent on the system that if that system gets pulled, other people, they have a way to survive. Like people who come from poverty in a rural aspect know how to do without, but I don't think very many Americans know how to do without. And some places are so densely populated, I think certain people's minds would snap and they would lash out at each other, and then the murder rate would go up extensively so, which would cause the military to come in. And then you would see people snap even further because their freedoms would be suppressed. And then that's, I think, when you would see some scary medical tyranny come in with a lot of robotics. So when Putin brings up the dollar and how it's a part of America's power. I find that to be quite interesting because many of us Americans don't really think about that. And so when you see how our leaders restricted Russia from using our currency just because of Ukraine, this made China and India and other countries start to wake up and say, America uses its currency as a weapon of war, so why should we peg ourselves to it? And then if you look at how China's competing, you're like, our leaders don't really care necessarily about us. So, like, I understand now the whole concept of big government is a huge bureaucracy. All these different branches doing whatever they want, and sometimes two operations will be happening at the same time, funded by the same source. And they're just endlessly combating each other and draining our resources. And you're like, what? So, like, one faction of the CIA will create one thing, another one will create another thing, and those two sides go against each other. This destabilizes nations, and then creates more animosity towards the United States, and then you have more people wanting to get away from the United States dollar, and not liking America's foreign policy of bomb, violence, stuff like that. It's quite strange. So we do have to, as Americans, look at what the dollar means for U.S. power. And him telling us that, while our own leaders don't tell us that, is very, very telling. Very telling. It's like the Hillary Clinton types and the Biden types, they just want us to shut up, keep working, and not demand any accountability for how they spend our money. Those politicians are supposed to work for us in a democracy, in a constitutional republic, because they're our representatives, they represent our interests as a people, right? But it appears they represent themselves and their pockets. He also mentions China's foreign policy is not one of aggression, but one of compromise, and that Russia and China have gotten along for quite some time. They share a border, and that America is hurting itself by not cooperating with China. And so, him mentioning just the history of Ukraine and Russia, mentioned Stalin, right, the Bolsheviks, Soviet Union, the Orthodox churches, and then mentioning how the history with China, China's economy, and then this sort of strange way America conducts its foreign policy. Now, the libertarians in America are a small third party, but they have talked about foreign policy, and more people are waking up to just how bizarre America is in terms of behavior. But it is important to look at the history of the Roman Empire, how they invited in a lot of foreigners, they expanded too far, decadence, and hedonism came in. You get a Caligula, a Nero, and whatnot. I think Biden is like our Nero in a way, because you can clearly see, like, look at the way Putin talks, look at the way Biden talks. The media tried to hide it. They would fact check you, Instagram would take down your posts. So Zuckerberg and all those ilk, they would work really hard to censor anyone criticizing the mental state of Biden. Like, for example, Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk, when Bernie was running, Bernie Sanders, was like, Biden has dementia, Biden has this. Vosh appears on, has a talk with Kyle about wolf genders and dragonkin, and kind of makes Kyle bend the knee, and Kyle flips, starts never talking about Biden's dementia, and then you see how slowly the liberals declare to, zip your mouth on Biden's mental state, and then Bill Maher has a discussion with Patrick Bet-David of the PBD podcast and says that Trump has more signs of dementia than Biden. He literally said that. So Bill Maher, a talking shill of the Democratic establishment, who says one minute he's libertarian, but he's clearly just a smug, affluent, coddled liberal, childless, drug-using, alcohol-drinking, atheist, he was in total denial about Biden's behavior and Gavin Newsom's policies. And when you see those people gaslighting all of us and just denying obvious facts, telling us to not trust our eyes on what we see and not to trust our ears on what we hear when it comes to Biden, you can now understand why those people who work for the establishment are so afraid of Tucker Carlson interviewing Putin, because we get to hear the other side. You have the European Union now saying they don't want to let Tucker Carlson in. You have, all it is a simple interview. People can interview serial killers. They just don't want Americans to wake up to how our pockets are being looted. I really think that's what it is. That's why you get called an anti-Semite if you don't want to fund a Zionist war, right? You'll get debanked and get punished. You get the Kanye West treatment. You'll get the Elon Musk take a tour treatment, bend the knee or else. And people are afraid. They want to keep their jobs. They don't want to get banned, right? And now, when you see how they tried to punish all Russians, how deeply the Hillary Clinton types need to keep the machine going, you can see why they're going after Tucker Carlson so hard just for having a simple interview. So what is this all about? It's about denying Americans the ability to hear the other side. So a lot of war propaganda. Now we can see why Elon buying Twitter and having a lot of free speech was so scary for liberals, because they really didn't want the Americans to hear the other side. That's why they banned Parler and other apps that they highly censor, because they don't want any type of counter narrative while claiming they hate fascism and stuff like that. So it's quite strange. It's quite strange. We've had a lot of bombshell interviews this year, right? But this one I think is topping the charts, and it's just a simple regular interview. It should happen many times. It would be great to see someone like Patrick Bet-David talk to Putin, and we just hear more and more. Like, this long form format of talking to leaders is great, because the people get to see inside the mind of very powerful individuals. And I think those who have something to hide and who are deeply corrupt and quite malicious and don't have the love of the people in their heart want to hide things, and it's just quite telling. So I have about maybe 40 minutes left to watch of the rest of the interview, but I wanted to share some of the notes I have here. And I think it's time Americans have a serious look in the mirror and say, do you want to send your son and your daughters to die for banker wars? Has patriotism and nationalism just been used as a meat cannon machine, right? Like profiteering off the mutilated minds and bodies of your citizens to line the pockets of the fat cats. We have a lot of war movies in America, right? Of the hero that goes in, guns blazing, and America has this bald eagle spirit of, take on the frontiers, be the heroes of the day. But we can't even be the heroes in our own communities. And we don't really have a unified culture anymore. And the left and the right have split on their social goals. So socially, America is moving closer and closer towards a civil war, because you have one side going after the children and doing a eugenics project and really pushing hormone blockers and stuff like that in public schools. So you have parents who are battling out, and then you have these wars on top, which is taking away good people from the community. And then because the border is open, you do have some nefarious people coming in and mixing with domestic grown gangs, and this is splitting, because the good people are drained out to go fight a banker war, and then there's not enough good people left in the communities who have strength and morals to fight off the evil. it's really fascinating because it's almost like our politicians are so low quality, are so run down, so undeserving of their positions of authority that they actually are directly trying to sabotage the success of the nation, you know? Because some countries are waking up to them wanting to be stronger and less afraid of America. And I realized as an American, our military is a point of fear. We are not loved. Like, England is super small, so, and in Canada, I mean, who's afraid of Canada? But Canada can provide bodies. If you just look at Germany, the UK, like, these countries just can provide bodies, but they don't have, like, the moral fiber. And then once you've done a brain drain on a region, it destabilizes and takes sometimes, over 50, 100 years to recover. And now the youth are not enlisting in the military as much. And after the forced jabs, people don't want to hand over their bodies so much to the military now. The recruitment numbers are down, and many have argued that they'll let all the illegals get citizenship if they become mercenaries and go fight in Ukraine against Russia, that they'll get a United States citizenship. People are talking about that. So when Putin mentions mercenaries, and then you see how the liberals are allowing an open border, it comes to the conclusion that how do you give those people citizenship? And if you do mass deportations, that's going to cause so much domestic disturbance to the economy and socially. How are you then going to have time and energy to then fund a two-front war with helping Israel and helping Ukraine while your own nation is just going crazy, while also funding all those military bases across the world, and then having your like Etsy, Instagram, and them and e-commerce then messing around with other countries, which is gonna lead to more competition, and people are gonna leave those apps. People will lose jobs because those apps will lay off people because no one's using them. Facebook laid off quite a number of people not too long ago, and Pinterest actually had to leave San Francisco because of the crime, which cost a lot of jobs to the liberal state. So you can see the liberal economic and social policies are actually causing quite a lot of decay. So if that happens at a domestic level, and we see how the neoliberals are not really doing quite well in their foreign policy, it's causing chaos as well that comes back to bite us. We have to take Putin's points seriously, right? It doesn't mean we believe everything he says, but I can see why they wanted to just don't listen to him, don't look over there, cover your eyes, put your fingers in your ears, just keep giving us money, go to work, pleb, you're nothing, you're scum, you don't have a brain, just go drink your beer, watch the NFL, and talk about Taylor Swift, don't watch a Putin interview. And now you see the kind of, there's some wisdom in Karl Marx's bread and circus example. America has the best examples of bread and circuses. Disneyland, Six Flags, all kinds of very strange attractions. Just the Hollywood is the only bread and circuses. Like how much they report on what Taylor Swift is doing with her stupid boyfriend. You're like, something suspicious going on. And they on TikTok, for example, they'll ban, milk toast podcasts like Timcast. And you're like, really censoring dialogue and conversation and just pushing, midget twerking videos and stuff that's not necessary and destroying attention spans. Like, they'll allow gangster thug rap, and they'll allow rappers like Sexy Red and, Cardi B. They'll let you consume that all day long, unfiltered, all day long. But they don't want you to have the ability to go watch a Vladimir Putin interview. Talk about a country that hates its own people. I think our politicians really hate us. How could they care about us if they do such things? So much to think about. Let me know what you think. There's a lot to discuss, but I was excited to learn about this phrase of Ukraine being an artificial state. Because if I look at a Ukrainian and Russian, I don't know the difference. To me, the language sounds the same. They look the same. I don't know. It's just like, what? It's like North Korea and South Korea. It's kind of how I see it, right? So much to think about when it comes to borders and nations and ethnicities and race and history. It's a gigantic labyrinth. History is also very fun to think about. So I enjoyed listening to that, and I am excited to see what the rest of the interview entails. If you watched it, let me know what was your favorite parts, and if you haven't watched it, go ahead and watch it. Take care.